This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. It is Friday, September the 25th in 2015, and we're coming to you live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And you can listen to the X-Zone live and our 24-hour feed at www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Michael Nardo. He's the author of The Beginning. Now, with the strange figure spotted on Mars reported a couple of weeks ago, it brings to question whether Earth really is the only planet with intelligent life. In his new fiction book, The Beginning, Michael Nardo presents a thrilling story based on research that should prove extraterrestrials shaped human life on Earth. The first installment of this science fiction trilogy tells the story on how a top-secret quasi-government committee consisting of members from the powerful corporations, intelligence agencies, scientists, and the President of the United States are involved in numerous cover-ups of close alien encounters throughout history. Now, according to Michael, he found a National Geographic study that said 77% of Americans believe there are signs that aliens have visited Earth. And this is a quote from Michael. I wrote the book to entertain people. But at the same time, make them aware the real possibilities that extraterrestrials have visited Earth all throughout human history. For more information on The Beginning by Michael Nardo, the website is www.thebeginningbook.com. And joining me from Wilmington, Delaware, is Michael Nardo. And Michael, welcome to the X-Zone.
Rob, thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure having you with us. Michael, tell us about the storyline of The Beginning.
Yeah, The Beginning is an action-packed science fiction thriller. The book is set in the ancient city of Samar, Iraq, in 2012, the site of the Garden of Eden and the cradle of civilization. The story begins with two young shepherds tending sheep near the mound of Tiamat. Bored, the two siblings ignore their parents' warning to stay out of Samar and the mound of Tiamat. It is said that these lands are the home of the ancients who have come from the heavens. Soon the children are in the midst of an amazing extraterrestrial encounter, one they never spoke of again. But someone else was watching, one of the most powerful national security agencies on Earth. In response, the military sends in 3 jet fighters to bomb the site and deploys Navy SEALs to the region on what the soldiers think is a routine recon mission to investigate Al-Qaeda movement in that region. What they eventually discovers makes them question everything they thought they know.
Wow. That sounds like a real-day thriller instead of a science fiction book. Fascinating, truly fascinating. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what was it that prompted you to write this book?
Well, I grew up in a lower middle-class family in Wilmington. I lived in a modest city row home. I went to Catholic grade school and public high school and played 4 sports. After graduating from the University of Delaware in 1975 with a liberal arts degree, I obtained a job with city government as a planner. I then went on to state government, and at the age of 29 became Director of Administration and Operations for the Attorney General's Office for the state of Delaware. And I served in state government for 21 years. With little money and at age 46, I started my own computer company called Future Tech Consulting, which I still serve as owner and CEO for the past 20 years. I'm married to my wonderful wife, Mary, for 39 years, and I have 3 beautiful daughters and 5 awesome grandchildren who we so enjoy. We're a close family. Each of my daughters live 5 or less miles from us. My wife and daughters are marathoners and multi-sport athletes. 2 of my daughters just ran the Boston Marathon this year, and my wife, Mary, competed in the International Triathlon Championship in Chicago this September. We both love to travel, and we've been to Europe, Central and South America, and Mexico, as well as Canada numerous times.
So tell me, what inspired you to write your book, The Beginning?
Well, first of all, I always wanted to write a book, Rob. Mm-hmm. It's something I always wanted to do. And I also wrote The Beginning to entertain people, but I also wanted them to be aware of the real possibilities that other intelligent extraterrestrial life in the universe, and that most likely they've visited Earth and had a major impact upon humanity. I hope to make the reader aware of the fact that recent studies support that probability, that we are not alone and in the universe. The book reviews some of the evidence to support these claims, and I hope the book opens people's eyes to the possibility, encourage them to read more about it.
Now tell us a little bit about the characters in The Beginning.
Yeah, there's a really good mixture of characters in the book. I'd say that they're diverse. They include Navy SEALs, terrorists, politicians, scientists, corporate billionaires, government and military officials. Many of these characteristics of these characters were developed from people I knew during my life. I even used some of the form of their names. That made it more interesting to me, and several of them enjoyed reading it to see that. I think the 2 best characters are Lieutenant Colby and Rocky Sabin. Colby is the head of the Navy SEALs platoon who was deployed to Samar. Rocky Sabin is retired from the Special Forces, is now head of the security for a major oil company and providing security for an archaeology dig outside Samar. They both are tough and respected by their men, but have different opinions about extraterrestrials and the origin of man. As the book develops, both engage in dialogue regarding the origin of man and various theories regarding extraterrestrials and their impact on humanity. It makes for an interesting backdrop.
So do you really think that the governments of the world and other agencies are actually suppressing the information that the ETs have been here and that we have been visited throughout history?
Well, I think that in the past 60 years, I think there's been some indication that the government is well aware of what's going on, and they've often used different things to cover it up. The issue is how many they're involved in. The other thing is the government's so big and so large with different kinds of organizations. They don't even share information. 9/11 occurred, and one of the biggest complaints were that the government didn't share information. So I'd imagine that is a very big possibility. There is evidence that there's been a lot of UFO crashes, sightings, and things of that nature. And it always seems like they come up with some explanation that, many scholars or scientists just say, their explanation's impossible. So you got to conclude that in some of these instances, not all of them, the problem is there's a lot of hoaxes out there.
Right.
And, so you're looking at maybe 1% of these sightings to be real. And the hoaxes, what they do is just, turn people off and makes them believe that none of this is real. But as you said earlier, the public is changing their opinion, about this. And a lot of people believe that, there's such a thing, and the government's covering it up. I think CNN did a poll. It said, 80%? 80% of the American public believe the government's covering this up.
Yeah, but a poll is only as good as the people that are polled.
That's correct. That's correct.
When you look at mainstream science, they're the first ones to tell you that. No, mainstream archaeology is telling us, well, listen, there's so much misinformation about the beginning of mankind, and all the evidence leads to us evolving, and that any thought about UFOs or ETs is nothing else but pure science fiction. So how do we deal with academia who's saying one thing, and then the people who seem to want to have something to believe and cling to are the ones who are saying, yes, the ETs are here?
Well, that's an interesting thought, because the bottom line is, the one of the theories that are out there is called the ancient astronaut theory.
Sure.
And that's been around for maybe less than 50 years. But you look back on some of the greatest scientists in man's history, and you find out that people like Bruno and Galileo, they came out and said, that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe.
Right. That
the sun was, and that even Bruno went even further and said that, there were even, numerous suns out there with different planets revolving around it. Unfortunately for both those people, Bruno was burned at the stake by the Pope and the Vatican, while Galileo was put in jail for several years. It wasn't until 200 years later that they were both, it was determined they were great scientists. So I guess my point is that, in our history, just, 500 years ago, people are trying to, find out the truth, and sometimes
Sure.
it just doesn't come out because mainstream scientists and scholars want to keep to what they know.
Would it be possible for any governmental agency in today's world, where technology has no way of securing itself, to actually suppress the information about extraterrestrial existence without the public knowing about it? I'll point to Edward Snowden. Here he has stolen several U.S. secrets, and yet he hasn't come up with anything that would even resemble a conspiracy to suppress the information about extraterrestrials or UFOs. And then you had the Assange, and once again, he didn't release any information about UFOs or extraterrestrials. And then with the Chinese and Russians hacking our computer banks and our databases, wouldn't this be a coup for them to find information that the United States has been keeping information from their people, the population, and that here's the proof, the smoking gun, that the ET existence is real, and that UFO crashes have been happening throughout the years, and the UFOs and the ETs were here throughout history. But once again, that hasn't been established. That hasn't been found. So how can we really take a serious look at all the claims about UFOs, ETs, and history if there is no evidence except polls?
It's a good question. I would think that any of that information that they have is not going to be computerized, first of all. They want to get rid of it quickly, anywhere they can. Either hide it somewhere, 40 floors underneath the ground or whatever, but I wouldn't think that any of that information is going to be computerized on government computers. I think that's number one. Therefore, it can't be hacked. I think that the bottom line has been that there is a lot of information the government doesn't tell us, and they keep it from us for reasons of the impact. I mean,
right.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine someday you wake up and there's this spaceship on just like science fiction movies
Sure.
on the White House lawn? What would people do? We wouldn't know what to do. That's a problem. I think the evidence is there to take a look at this seriously. We should be at least prepared if something like this happens. I mean, you look at what Kepler's finding out. It's opening people's eyes. I mean, we got 400 billion stars just in the Milky Way galaxy alone.
Sure.
And then you got 500 billion galaxies. Some people say there's possibly 40 billion Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zone from their suns. That's a very big number.
Right, but once again, these are just theories, hypotheses. There's no proof to substantiate any of these claims.
That's true, and there's no proof in a lot of instances to substantiate claims that were made, in other areas of religion and things of that nature, which man has taken upon faith. So why is this any different?
Well, because I think that religion is a choice. You have a choice to believe in what you want to believe in. But when it comes to the extraterrestrial question or the interference or the manipulation of ETs with the human race throughout history, that is a claim that should have some proof behind it before it's even considered to be serious.
Well, I don't disagree with that,
yeah.
Okay? But at the same time, I like to see that there is enough evidence to at least start an intellectual dialogue with people that have evidence, that they think they have evidence, and present that evidence to people that don't agree with that and come up with some conclusions. I also like the government, the U.S. government's one of the only, a few of the governments that don't really recognize a lot of things. I mean, France and England and some of the other people are opening their files, and America just keeps them, disclosed. And, it's time to maybe bring forward with some of the stuff they do have.
But even with France and England, when they released their files, there was no smoking gun. There was nothing that wasn't out there before. And with modern technology, with all the webcams, there's no proof that anyone has taken. And my belief is that even if the scientific community was part of a great conspiracy, a great cover-up, you have all the amateur astronomers on this planet that would also be contributing any findings, and they would, in my opinion, be the people to release any of these great findings. And yet, all these years later, nothing. Look at Roswell, 1947. A lot of theories, a lot of hypotheses, no proof. So, are we looking at a social phenomenon here?
I don't think we are. I think we're looking at something that has some, serious possibilities. Okay, and enough that they should be looked into.
Mm-hmm.
You have all of a sudden, astronauts Cooper and Mitchell and people. I even believe Armstrong was ready to say something as they got older and got towards their end of their careers as well as their lives.
Or is it that they're getting near the end of their glory years, that they have to say something to try and regain some of the glory, some of the way the world looked at them, that they're getting old, they're getting forgotten. Plus, why would anyone who takes an oath of allegiance to keep anything secret, when they break that oath, people look at them as heroes? I look at them as traitors.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's the evidence, any evidence in that regard of that would support that concept that we're talking about. The people should know, okay?
But do they need to know?
Yes, they do.
Why?
They should know.
Why?
Everybody should know where they come from. Everybody should know the truth. I mean, it's the way things are going, and everybody is just, not knowledgeable. And what happens one day that if it does happen? We're not going to be prepared. It'll be chaos, and then what?
Well, is it up to the citizens to be prepared, or is it up to the government to be prepared?
Well, in my opinion,
yeah,
I don't rely on the government.
Why not?
I rely on myself, because at the end of the day, that's what it's going to be. I have to protect my own family.
So how are you going to do that?
Well, I'll do it the best I can.
But what happens if all this is hype? Like 2012. Y2K, the year 2000. All the hype that was surrounding that year in computers. What happens if this is all hype, like the end of the world, Harold Camping Let me see, Jonathan Kahn. Then we had the end of the world, 2012, December 21st, the end of the Mayan calendar. All this was supported by New Age practitioners, those who believed in the conspiracy theories that the government was suppressing information, that these people who are making all these claims knew more than the government knew. And at the end of the push and the shove match, nothing happened. What happens if the extraterrestrial event is just like this? A lot of hype, no meat.
And it could be. It could be, but I think there's enough evidence if you look at everything, and that's what the book tried to do. I don't know if I accomplished that. It was my first book. I wouldn't think I'm anywhere near a great author. I'm probably below average, but it was my first book. And I wrote it on a subject that I really think I enjoy.
Sure.
I enjoy researching it. And I think there is a lot of evidence out there. And it crosses so many different lines. It's so hard to put it all together. But, you know, the little bit that I have been able to do, it seems to me that it's worth looking at and not put our heads in the sand. And that's all I'm saying. Get the people in a room that need to be in a room, that have different opinions, and let's get the evidence out there. And if it is what you say it is, then that's it. It's fine.
But with those who really believe that there are... Listen, I've had people on the show who swear on a stack of Bibles that there are UFOs 600 miles wide, 16 to 20 miles high in Earth orbit. You know, I've heard every claim from every part of the world. People want to believe. So does the government not have enough, and whether it's the American government, the Canadian government, or the British government, or any other government, don't they have enough on their plates right now with the world of reality? Then, and instead of spending time and resources on a hypothetical situation, like where does the priority land?
Well, the priority lands where, you know, the truth is, as far as I'm concerned. If something as big as this is, it just, we do a lot of ridiculous things with government money, and, something like this, I don't think falls in that category. I think we need to take it seriously. I mean, if you look at some of the so-called UFO encounters that have occurred, a lot of them have occurred on military bases.
Right.
They have been seen by military officers that are respected, that have come out and said things that support those claims. You know, in England, across the United States, and in several locations. I mean, look at the Phoenix Lights. There's been a lot of discussion about that. You had a governor who basically, kind of made a fool of himself in a press conference and turns around and, finally admits that he did see it and that, it was real. You had people that were credible people that saw the thing was right underneath them.
Yeah, but you
I just, you get all these people that are credible, and you just, everybody just discards it and says, it didn't happen, or it's some kind of balloon, or it's, whatever the 20 million things the government says the things are.
Yeah, but what about, you're saying 20 million things that the government says, but you've got all the wingnuts out there, as well as the people who appear to be credible ufologists and researchers, that certainly outweigh the number of people who are battling the government on this. And, it's like if the government came out tomorrow and they said, all right, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a discussion, we're going to put all our cards on the table. And at the end of that meeting, let's say it took 3 weeks, there was no evidence whatsoever that came out that ETs were real. Would the people who believe that we're being visited, would they be satisfied with the government's proof? No.
Well, it depends on how it's done. Okay, it just depends on how it's done, and 3 weeks is not going to cut it. It needs more than that, and it needs it does need to be studied, and that's one of the objectives I was hoping to get from the book, at least to make people knowledgeable of some of the new evidence that's coming out. The probabilities of there's so many stars, there's so many universes that it just seems to me that the probability is very high that there's intelligent life, and given the fact that our planet's only 44 billion years old, and theirs may be 15 billion years old. I'm sure there's a lot more out there that are intelligent than ours and have the ability to be able to travel from one place to the other.
All right, if we look at the scale of evolution and how we have evolved, and let's say there is another planet out there that has some sort of life on it. We don't know if the life forms on the other planets are carbon-based like we are. What happens if that other life form is, let's say, quartz-based or silicone-based instead of carbon-based? What, Neil, you take a look at what SETI has been doing over the years. They haven't found any evidence. Because I think that if there is life out there, number one, they're more evolved than we are. They wouldn't be using the mode of transportation that we think they're using. They wouldn't be using the radio frequencies that we think they're using. Because if they are evolved, they've surpassed our technology and our understanding of technology. So how do we know what we're looking for is either there or not there? You know, this is such a wide topic, and science fiction plays a major part. Hollywood plays a major part. The internet, the world's biggest septic tank, plays a major part. Because you have anyone who wants to vent themselves, they open a blog, it gets on Google, and it becomes part of the myth.
That's true.
So where does reality...
Everything you're saying is correct.
So where does reality lie?
It's a good point you make. I think there's enough of it, enough of doubt, enough of evidence that again, it needs to be looked at and taken seriously. But you get a public whose opinion is high on it, but most people don't like to talk about it because they don't want to be looked at as a radical.
Well, I've been told by a number of people who've come on the show that there's enough evidence within the UFO community that if the case was go to court, the preponderance of evidence would tilt the scale in supporting the proof of the extraterrestrial and UFO existence. Have you heard that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And I say, have that court.
Well, you know what? Funny you should say that. We offered that very opportunity with a TV show called Paranormal Court. Do you know everyone declined to come on the show?
That's unfortunate.
Because they couldn't substantiate their claims.
That's unfortunate.
All the biggies who go to all these conventions, give all these speeches, do all these so-called reality TV shows, they declined. They declined to take lie detector tests. They declined to take psychological stress evaluator tests. They declined, which in my book, as a former cop, proves them to be liars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why I'm
did
a little
they say
more...
Why? When you asked them, did they say why they didn't want to do it?
Well, they didn't think they had to justify...
an explanation.
Well, sure, the explanation was they didn't want to have to justify their claims.
Mm-hmm. Were they worried about the media that was going to be presented at?
No, they were afraid that they were going to be exposed on national television.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to have a press conference at the National Press Gallery, but it's a totally different thing to have a TV show where you've got millions of people watching and you're put on the hot seat based on the statements that you've made.
Well, I don't know who these individuals are, obviously, and without knowing that, I can't comment. But I understand your point. But at the same time, from what I've seen in the research that I've done, there's just, in my opinion, enough evidence that there is a high probability that some of the stuff did occur,
sure,
and that it should be looked at, and that's what I believe.
Do you know what the ironic part of the entire thing with the TV show was?
What's that?
The government agreed. The Air Force agreed to come on. The intelligence agencies agreed to come on.
Didn't do it.
Wait a second. Who didn't? The people who were making these claims?
Yeah.
No, they refused. NASA was going to come on.
What government? The United States government?
The United States government. They declined.
Interesting.
They declined. They have a lot of, when it comes to putting stuff on the internet, they're wonderful at it, but when push comes to shove, they cower. I know. I know exactly how you're feeling. It blew my mind as well. It blew my mind. Because I figured, hey, you're getting the chance to make good on what you say. You say that nobody believes you. Here's your chance. So that's why I'm sorry.
Yeah, again, I don't know who the people are that you approached, and I don't know what what agenda the government had, and if they presented people that haven't obviously been involved in some of these things that occurred in the past 50 years, obviously they're going to go on there and deny everything like they had for years. I mean, I could see how that would be going on. You need a structured environment where the evidence can be presented by both ways.
You need.
They could say
You need honesty.
It needs to be done in that way. Some kind of independent.
It was going to be done. It was going to be done in a courtroom with a real judge, a real defense lawyer, a real prosecution lawyer, and the jury being the American and Canadian public.
Mm-hmm.
They declined. But you know what? That's their right. But what it did to me was show me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they can't back what they're talking about. It's just like Area 51. Do we really need to know what the American government is doing to protect us? I don't think so. I don't think that just because you're an American citizen or a Canadian citizen, you have the right to know the nation's secrets. Hey, I'm very satisfied, and I sleep very well at night, knowing that there are men and women around this world, whether they're the Canadian Armed Forces, the U.S. forces, or any of our allies, who at a moment's notice are willing to give their life to defend my democracy, my freedom, and my safety. I don't think that I have the right to question the government on what weaponry they're using, what they're developing, just so that I think I know that I have that right and I should know? No, I don't. I remember when the F-117 was going through its final stages of testing at Area 51. All the UFO junkies that love to break the law and enter Area 51 we're getting Doppler radar systems. And they couldn't understand why they were seeing these lights in the sky, but there was no radar return. It had to be extraterrestrial. Well, it wasn't extraterrestrial at all. It was the F-117 stealth bomber. So do we need to know? Do we need to put more lives at risk? Not only the lives of the members of the military, but the lives of the civilians. And if there are underground bases, well, hello, that's because the Russians and other countries who are not friendly to the U.S. and Canada have the same satellite technology that we have. And if we can peekaboo on them, they can certainly peekaboo on us. And the thing that makes sense is put them underground or into mountains. So do we really need to know? And when you get members of the military who come forward and say, yes, they've seen UFOs, and yes, UFOs are real, and yes, there were 30 some odd astronauts that went to planet Serpa. All of this without any proof, except their say-so. Another thing that I find very hard to understand is all the contradictory statements made within the UFO community itself. They don't share information, they hoard information. Instead of working together on a common cause, each and every one of these organizations are wanting to grasp at the smoking gun so they get all the credit, all the glory. I find it very hard to understand how anything will ever get accomplished.
Well, I don't disagree with what you're saying. First of all, I support the military, and I think the military does a great job, but that doesn't mean that I respect the fact that people are keeping weapon information. Mm-hmm. I don't need to know about that.
Sure.
I feel comfortable that the government has that under control, and they should, okay? But there are some things that I don't particularly think that they should, keep from us.
Like
and
what?
When it comes to that kind of, the fact that maybe there has been some UFOs crashing in this country or other places around the world, that they have recovered those vehicles and done whatever they've done to them, hide them or get rid of them or do whatever they've done. That's different than talking about what you're talking about.
But
all I'm asking for, I think the public needs is you want to call it a court?
Mm-hmm.
Your situation where these people didn't come on, I would have to understand what the forum you were proposing for this to be done on. But I would like to see a dialogue, and I'd like to see that possibly we can come to some kind of closure on this. Is it real or is it not? But my look at it, and I'm an amateur. I admit I'm an amateur,
Sure.
but I think I'm a pretty intelligent person.
I agree with you.
I've got a college degree.
Yeah.
I've got I ran a business for 20 years, and I could look at evidence. I was in the Attorney General's office with a
Right.
bunch of lawyers. Worked with police officers.
Right.
I just think that, where's the smoking gun? I don't know. I just think there's enough of everything out there that is probable that it needs to be looked at, only from the fact that, if something does happen, we need to be prepared. Okay? And maybe they do have something to prepare it. And it just, it doesn't make any sense to me from the standpoint that I think people are going to be really shocked if something like that ever happened.
All right. If let's say the government is aware, all right, hypothetically, the government is aware, don't you think that they would be in the position to take preventative measures or to have plans already in place that if in the eventuality that this really happened, that they would do what they could? However, how do you fight an enemy that you really know nothing about? If you're traversing the universe, the galaxy, if you're able to, surpass light speed into warp speed, how are our weapons that we know about going to be effective against an enemy of this magnitude, an enemy of this caliber?
It's probably not.
So maybe it's just as well. Well, what would happen if the president of the United States went on TV and said, my fellow Americans, we are in dire straits. We are actually facing an extraterrestrial invasion. We have proof. What would happen to society?
I think there'd be panic.
So what would...
It depends on how it's handled, and that's not a way it should be handled. I think there has to be some thought about how that would be done, because you would get panic. You get panic in the cities, you get panic all over. I don't care what anybody says. That's something that has a lot of ramifications.
So do we need to know if it's there? Do we need the panic? Do we need the hype? Do we need to put ourselves in a greater social vice than we're already in?
Again, it depends on how it's handled, and it needs to be handled correctly. So I don't know what way that is. It's going to have to be done over time. You just can't dump on it. That kind of information on somebody. And that's kind of what could possibly happen if we just don't do anything. And boom, one day there it is. How are you going to react? How people, if these people are completely different than ours, have different beliefs and all these other things, and, how are the people going to take it? What's the impact on our institutions, whatever what they are, financial, religious? It's something that, again, you look at it from a standpoint, probabilities. There's a lot of probabilities that there could be some truth to this. Okay, and if there is, we need to investigate it and then turn around and get the facts on the table and then come up with some kind of plan that intelligently puts this forth. Okay, otherwise you're not doing anything and it's going to be a disaster. So,
but once again, what happens if all this? Like I've been doing this show now for 24 years. I have not seen anything that remotely resembles physical evidence. A lot of hearsay, a lot of third-party evidence. But when it comes to physical evidence, none. And this is what the UFO community is lacking. Evidence. Another way to look at it is, Who's perpetrating the conspiracy theory? Well, is it the government? No. Is it the church? No. Who has most to gain from maintaining this cover-up theory? The UFO community. That's who. So is it possible that the perpetration of all these cover-up theories, the conspiracy theories, are being manifested and manufactured by the UFO community itself? Because without this theory in place, they are forced to show evidence. But as long as there's a conspiracy theory in place, they can hide behind it. They don't have to show evidence because the government is suppressing the information. The government is suppressing the evidence. So who, in fact, is most likely to be responsible for the UFO phenomena and all its theory? The UFO community.
Well, unfortunately, you did have two presidents, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, who said that they saw something. Okay, and how they would have got any evidence of that, I don't know. There was no pictures taken. It's what they saw. This thing happens, in minutes.
Sure.
And boom.
All right.
Okay, so you had two presidents, well-respected men. Both good people, who said that they saw something.
They saw something. They saw something. I agree. They saw something. And when we stop taking the somethings as extraterrestrial crafts from another galaxy or another planet and look at other possibilities of what it could be, how do we know it wasn't a test vehicle that the military was testing? How do we know that? I agree. They
pretty much said they didn't think it was,
but they couldn't identify it.
Well, that's unfortunate. That's why they're called unidentified flying
Exactly. Exactly.
That's why they're called UFOs.
Right.
But in those cases, there's a lot of documentation. There was cases, there was evidence, and the government got rid of it. Now, I'm not saying in all those cases that happened. But let's just say there's a handful of really stuff that really did happen, and that small handful, okay, compared to what actually people do say, that's controllable, and maybe it was controlled.
Do you remember the story about the MJ-12 papers?
Yes.
How they were supposed to be legitimate, and then it was discovered they were hoaxed.
And they were hoaxed.
Yeah.
They were hoaxed.
Yep.
Again, I'm so unfortunate because it takes away from what may be real. And there's been a lot of that.
Sure.
And it's for the same reasons that you're saying why that's happening. And because people, you want to perpetrate some things and say some things that necessarily are not true. But it hurts the reality, the small number that may be real. And that, I think, is the issue. And, if you look at all the UFOs out there where, someone comes out that like the crop thing, okay, you find out that in England that you had a couple guys who actually had a conspiracy and made these crop
circles. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it discredited everything else. But there was one or two that they couldn't explain. So my point is that, it's unfortunate. You're right in what you're saying. But again, I think there's enough there that there is some real things that have happened. And there are probably several of them were covered up.
Michael,
that's what I believe.
I want to be a believer, Mike. I, honest to God, want to believe. But I want to see the proof. I'm not going to take anybody's word on it. I'm not going to take a theory, a hypothesis, a blurry picture. Did you know that UFO pictures have drastically declined ever since the advent of computers that can analyze photos?
Yeah, but there's been some that have been analyzed that have been indicated or concluded that are real, okay, and that can't be explained.
Real anomalies, right? Unidentified.
Well, I'm just telling you, there has been some that have not been able to be explained.
But the numbers
and
are
again,
way...
you're a small percentage versus, these other hoax.
Exactly.
There's been hoaxes out there, plenty of them.
Sure.
It's unfortunate. And maybe some of those are perpetrated by, people that are legitimate circles. You just don't know. Some of them are from people that are just want the attention. But again, unfortunately, that number is large, okay, and it takes away from the ones that really are, there's no explanation for them other than what some people concluded, that they're real.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. I don't disagree with a lot you're saying.
See, like I said, I want to believe. I really do. But over 24 years, 4 guests a night, 5 nights a week, I've interviewed over 3,900 guests.
Mm-hmm.
No proof. No proof. Whether it's in UFOs, extraterrestrials, or any of the other topics that we cover here.
So you're telling me that all these people, astronauts, majors, colonels, police officers, thousands and thousands of credible people, an ex-governor from, Arizona, so they're just out there saying this to give attention to themselves?
What I'm saying is that they've seen something they can't explain. So psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you when we cannot explain something we see, then we assume it to be something that we've heard about that resembles what we've seen. So, in my opinion, they have seen something. I'm not taking that away from them at all. They just don't know what they've seen, and they assume, based on folklore, mythology, legend, hype, and the internet, that what they've seen is a UFO. And it truly is a UFO, but they never establish whether it's a UFO from another planet or a UFO of a terrestrial kind. I'm giving them an out. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying they are not right when they say it's a UFO from outer space. That's what I'm saying.
So how do you explain some of them?
Like what?
Let's talk about Phoenix Lights and all the thousands and thousands of credible people that saw that. And it wasn't just a light or an orb in the sky. It was that people actually saw a thing as large as the 3 football fields. I mean, that to me, is real.
What they
People did take some photographic pictures of them. Some of them are kind of amateurish to me. It doesn't prove anything to me, but
right.
People say they were right underneath it, and it was a huge, large thing. Thousands of people. I don't know. They're all hallucinating.
I'm not saying they're hallucinating. They saw something, but what it was they saw, they just don't know.
And the government tried to explain it and made fools of themselves. And everybody knows that.
Or was the government telling the truth, and that the people just didn't want to look like idiots themselves, so they made the government out to look like the fool? It's called deflection.
Yeah, that's true. And it happens all the time.
Sure.
It happens all the time. But I'm just taking, in this particular situation, the government in the United States has decided that anything that came along this way that was credible, they were going to cover it up. And I don't think it's like a whole lot of different times that this happened, but there was some times that it did. That was and it's unfortunate that the evidence is gone. Okay, the real evidence. But when people say they've seen something and they believe that's what it was, and there's so many people, not just 1 or 2 or 4 or 5, we're talking thousands and thousands of people from all different, priests, astronauts, military people. I mean, these people were just not hallucinating things.
No, like I've said, they've seen something, but what they've saw and what it could have been identified as, in my belief, are 2 different things.
Well, shouldn't we know what they did see then? Shouldn't we understand?
They don't understand what they've seen 9 times out of 10. They can't give you an exact description.
Then what was it?
You know what? I don't.
What was it?
Listen, I'm not making the claim that I saw something in the sky that was a UFO. I never
did. I never saw anything.
I'm not an astronaut. I'm not an astronaut who makes these ridiculous claims. And it's only 3 astronauts out of how many people? How many astronauts?
No, there's been quite a few astronauts in the space program.
Sure there have. There have. So it's the way I look at it is that if there is something out there, prove it. It's that simple. Prove it. If not, let's get on to the next problem. Let's worry about feeding the hungry. Let's worry about, clothing the people who need clothes. Let's worry about making sure everybody has a house to live in. Let's make sure everybody's got water. Let's make sure everybody's got the proper medical care that they so rightly deserve instead of worrying about little green men from Alpha Centauri.
I don't disagree with you about worrying about certain things.
No, but here's something, my friend.
But the point is that if it is real and we're not prepared, okay, then what?
You're right.
There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be hungry. There's going to be a lot of people who need to be clothed.
Sure, yeah, we're talking about the movie Independence Day. You wake up in the morning, there's a UFO over Los Angeles, there's a UFO over New York City, and every other major center in the world because they're getting ready for a land-based space invasion. I understand that.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
Do you think that given the knowledge that we have now from Kepler, Hubble, I'm not talking about SETI because SETI's a whole other ballgame, and I agree with you about that. The science that they're using is just ridiculous.
Sure it is.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's people at University of Arizona who think they should be using laser-related items, and I don't even know if that's probably archaic too. So, but getting back to my point, how do we know any of it's true? How do we know that it's not? If there's some doubt, then I think we should look into it. And in my opinion, something as big as that could result in even worse of what you're talking about as far as the hunger and everything that we got now. It could be even worse.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. But let me ask you this question. If, in fact, there have been UFO crashes, and if, in fact, the military or the scientific community have done any reverse engineering, as so many people believe they have, and these are the same people who believe that the UFOs are here, there's a moon base, there's a giant-sized UFO, or UFOs, in a high Earth orbit. Would we need to use the rocket technology we have today if we already have reversed engineers extraterrestrial crafts? Would it take so long for a probe or a satellite to get from Earth to Mars? Would it take so long to get from Earth to Pluto? Would we not be able to have the engineering and the scientific capabilities to get the helium-3 off of the moon, bring it back to Earth so that, coal fuel wouldn't be necessary anymore?
Well, the bottom line is we don't know if they did capture or get some kind of UFO vehicle. Do we have the minerals, the resources that would fuel that? I mean, that's another thing. So that could be an issue. There's just so many different things. The bottom line is that in our religious scriptures, there are things that are said, that can be interpreted 40 million different ways.
Sure.
There's, the book of Enoch, which was, basically hidden for years, that makes claims that are pretty unbelievable, okay? And Enoch was a very respected person, in the bloodline of Noah. And, there's other prophets that have been out there that have made statements. There's the Bible, there's the Quran. That there's so many different things in there that talk about, people coming from the heavens and the angels and all that kind of stuff.
Greek mythology.
And, how do you explain that? How do you explain that? And how do you say that maybe what they saw, wasn't really what they saw? Maybe they saw some kind of, spaceship, but didn't know how to explain it and didn't know.
Or maybe they saw nothing at all, that this was just something that they wrote in order to try to make some semblance of the Earth that they were part of, looking up in the sky, the stars. If the Bible was written today with what we knew, the Bible would be totally different. And in fact, archaeology, paleontology, and other sciences are proving each and every day that the Bible is anything but correct. Like the story you mentioned, Noah. The story about Noah and the ark was a Babylonian tale that the Jews put into the Bible using Noah's name. It had nothing to do with the Bible until the Jews made an exodus into Babylonia. It's a Babylonian tale, and it's not a worldwide flood. So we have to take step by step, whether it's in science, whether it's in, archaeology, whether it's in paleontology, whatever the case may be. My God, we're still teaching kids that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas when it was actually the Vikings. Right. So, hey, listen, I'm not saying that this UFO phenomenon is not a complex issue. It is. I look at the total issue as an onion. We have to keep on taking off the layers to get to the truth.
I agree with that. I just like to see a little bit more structured. Okay?
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
And that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for a little structure to get the truth out, and let's find out what it is, and let's put it to bed so we can look at the things that we need to be looking at.
And you know what, Michael? After having the pleasure of talking to you for nearly an hour, I think if anybody can bring that structure to the scenario, it's you, my friend.
Well, I don't know about that, but I want to keep researching, and I've already started my second book. It's called Path of the Gods, and I'm on chapter 7, so hopefully by next year at this time, everybody got to keep posted to the www.thebeginningbook.com. And I will say something. I'm actually not in this for money.
I don't know anybody who is.
I can honestly say that. I'm not in it for money. I'm in it for, trying to find out the truth. I enjoy researching things. I've actually found another passion I like. As I get older, I may be able to do this a little bit more, when I have time. With my business the way it is, and it occupies a lot of my time, and it's difficult to do a lot of things that I want to do the right way. But like I said, I can tell you I'm in it for the right reasons, and I just think it needs to be looked at. I have grandchildren I'm concerned about and the future of them. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Michael, it's been great having you on the show. I wish you success, XO Nation. Michael Nardo is our guest. He's the author of The Beginning, his website, www.thebeginningbook.com. Thanks for being with us, Michael.
Thank you, Ron.
XO Nation, I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Like I keep telling everybody, I want to believe. I really do. But I want to see the proof. It's that plain. It's that simple. Is this a black and white topic? If it's real, yes, it is. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.